Good evening, and welcome to your second of the 3 weekly webinars, which are aimed in addressing challenges likely to impact on the dairy farms in Northern Ireland. My name is Judith McCord. I'm one of the dairy advisors at CAFRE, and I will be your chair for tonight's event. Last week's webinar was an introduction to the topic of carbon, and the final webinar next week will be attracting, training, and retaining staff in our industry. Tonight's event will be recorded and will be available through the CAFRE website at a later date. Tonight's webinar examines how managing and feeding attributes to sustainability on farm. We have a range of speakers here for this evening. In terms of asking questions, you have the opportunity throughout this event to submit your questions. Laptop users can submit questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Mobile users can access the Q&A option via the 3 dots which appear when you tap your mobile. I will ask Dawn Morrow, Head of Dairy at CAFRE, to introduce the topic and set the scene. Then each of the 2 main speakers will last about 20 minutes. Thanks, Dawn.
Thanks, Judith. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to start this with a thanks to our partners, the Dairy Council in Northern Ireland and the Ulster Farmers Union, for their support with this series of webinars, which we hope address some of the challenges facing dairy farmers at present. In terms of an introduction, the term sustainable has become very common recently, with a wide range of businesses from banking to buses to building, highlighting that they are becoming more environmentally sustainable, and they are. The customers for our dairy products expect that farms producing those products are also becoming more environmentally sustainable, while at the same time we have to ensure that these changes are economically sustainable as well. Last week, as Judith has said, we looked at carbon emissions, and this week we look a little wider, but of course carbon will still be part of that mix. Both our speakers tonight will focus on improving the sustainability and efficiency of the dairy herd. As outlined last week, enteric or rumen methane production from each animal means that every animal on the farm has to be as productive as possible within the system that's used or chosen. Poor health, late first calving, surplus stock, all these add to the carbon output and cost without production and income to balance. And the point is that effective management of the herd to minimize these not only brings environmental benefits, but also financial benefits. Similarly, management of those key inputs of feed and fertilizer to maximize their efficiency also brings environmental and financial benefits. It's important to remember that there are and there will always be new technologies and products that are coming along to improve our feed efficiency, to reduce methane production, but these will have to be applied effectively and economically by the farms. And as we've seen with other advances in technology in the past, once those are widely available, consumers assume that they will be applied and used, and they will reset their expectations accordingly. And that means that we always have to be looking for the next step forward. The same will apply to management of manures to reduce emissions. As improved management and technology brings improved nutrient efficiency, so farms will be expected and should be able to reflect that in reduced inorganic fertilizer use. Obviously, current fertilizer prices will be focusing minds more keenly on that this spring, but that approach will have to continue. Later tonight, one of our speakers will contrast bad and best innovative practice in the reduction of antimicrobial use. It's always reassuring to be able to say we're not the worst out there, but as food producers, there is a responsibility to ensure that not only do we protect our consumers in terms of the products that we sell them, but also in the potential implications of our antimicrobial use on farm will have on wider human health. Also, as an exporting region, we have to ensure that we have the high standards to widen and improve the potential markets for our dairy products. In practice, antimicrobials are likely to become less available, both in terms of availability for general use and the use of critically important products. So we have to prepare to be able to maintain and improve herd health with less use of these. And it's likely that that will involve a combination of novel and innovative replacements, which will be described later. But along with these will have to come a greater focus on the management of the herd and the environment we provide for our cattle. As someone that's involved in the planning the way ahead for the CAFRE herd, I can appreciate that all this talk and discussion of change and adaptation is daunting. But the fact is that every dairy farm in Northern Ireland is adapting and changing every year. Most dairy farms have a mental or physical list of the next change or improvement that they want to implement when funding or time becomes available. We just have to now move and change our focus on that to sustainability. But as I've said, change will also have to include financial sustainability. I hope and expect that you will find our speakers tonight help you look forward to those changes more positively. And I'll ask Judith now to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Yep, on to our first speaker for this evening. Going to welcome Neil Dyson. Neil is a farmer from Buckinghamshire who is an innovation farm for ARLLA UK. Tonight, Neil will give us a bit of his experience of how he has adjusted his dairy cow management to become more sustainable. Thanks, Neil. If I hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just put my screen up.
I'll just take the moment here whenever Neil's putting his presentation up there to say that, again, questions, please, any questions that you have, put into the Q&A box. I see them coming through there now. A few questions there for Dawn so far. So please just fire ahead there and put your questions in and we'll pick them up as we're going along. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to be able to share a little bit of time with you. As Judith said, I'm down in Buckinghamshire, which down in the southeast, and I quite like this photograph that you can see of the farm. It was taken this year, and it's quite unusual for us in that it was taken in high summer, and there's a black cloud, and it's been raining, and we're very green, which is not normal for us. But so that's just a little bit of the farm there. Oh. Wait. Okay, so here's a picture of the team. Jane and myself, and then our eldest daughter, Susanna, who came home about 4 years ago with her husband, Adam, and we are running the farm together. So we've already had a recent change, and I expect you've probably had seminars, or in the future you'll have seminars all about handing over to the next generation. So we are learning, so maybe we could learn from yourselves. Okay, so I wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview of our farm, just to let you get a bit of a picture in your mind about it. So we own 2/3 and rent 1/3. We're in an area where dairy farming is not very popular. It's not on farming a bit cheap, but actually it means competition for land is not so great, and we don't have any problem with actually doing a muck for straw share. So that's quite a benefit for our area. We've got 450 cows. I was listening to your rolling introduction just before we started, and I noticed that our yield per cow is about the same as your herd at CAFRE, but our solids are much, much higher. We're producing about 794 kilos of fat and protein, and for us that is really important. I'm going to talk quite a lot about ARLLA shortly, who we belong to, and that's very important. So when we are looking at anything to do with efficiency, we are now learned, or ARLLA has taught us to talk now, like the Kiwis and like other manufacturing areas, to talk about kilos of fat and protein. I think we all will have to learn that, or actually have to mentally do that calculation. So we are 3 times a day milking. That's we find that works for our labour, and you're talking about labour next week, so that might be quite interesting. We are summer calving, and the reason we're doing that is because, although I showed you a picture of a very lush countryside and the rain cloud. Normally in the summer we don't get a lot of rain at all, and if we get a lot of rain in the spring and autumn, then we can't graze because we're clay soil, and we don't feel it's worth putting in tracks, because in the summer if it's dry there's nothing to eat anyway. Well, I will be talking a bit more about replacements later, but you can see from that we carve our replacements at least in a very tight block, and we're hoping to carve everything at 24 months. I think it's quite significant now for us. We've been dabbling in sec semen for quite some time, but now this autumn we have just used only sec semen. So next year we will, for the first time, only have heifers, or 90% heifers, being born. So our challenges and opportunities. I mean, obviously I can't talk about all these this evening. I want to talk about the Clean Water, Clean Air Act. I won't obviously talk about labour quality, but that is an issue for us. I won't talk about rising energy costs and rising feed costs, because although that is an issue, that's not something I want to talk about this evening. I do want to touch on carbon footprint. Don alluded to it. I know you've had a webinar last week, but we've started to realise through ARLLA again that actually there is a win-win at the moment with carbon footprint and efficiency and profitability. So just a little bit about ARLLA UK, the innovation farm. We are a test base for a number of new projects that ARLLA wants to do. We act as a central place for farmer meetings and discussions. We also act as a centre for ARLLA to invite stakeholders to the industry. A lot of media interest. I'll talk about some of the technologies later on. And also we're helping ARLLA sort of in its relationship with its buyers and also potential customers. So this idea of ARLLA's to have an innovation farm started in the UK. They've just launched one in Sweden, and they're hoping to launch them in other countries as well. So Germany and such like. So I thought we'd just go back to thinking about ARLLA. Being a member of ARLLA is very important to us as a farm. We've always been collaborative, but I think it's a very important point. And there are some significant things that drive ARLLA and therefore drive the farmers and the way we then respond with our milk production and systems. So they're always looking over their shoulders to Friesland Campina. They're very pleased that they beat them last year, but that is good for us, because what's happening is that with ARLLA, they are being driven by international companies, not just by national companies. So if the national situation is not so good, or there's too much competition driving down milk price, then actually we find that ARLLA, because they are being challenged internationally, that is actually giving us a competitive edge. They're doing ARLLA Garden. ARLLA Garden is just a general data collection. We got a premium for it to start with. Now we don't. If we don't do it, we actually lose money. And they are just collecting data all the time, but it is useful for them. And you have to remember all the time, as a farmer, ARLLA belongs to us. So we should embrace it, because it's going to add value. Now they're doing something called climate check, which is 0.9 pence per litre, I should say, not PPP. That is voluntary at the moment, but that's to give us a base as a farm, and ARLLA a base, in order to know where we are and to get to net zero, what we've got to do eventually. And I'll come on and talk a little bit about that later. We, within ARLLA and the UK mainland just here, have a significant interest in seasonality. And it's still a problem for ARLLA, particularly when it's supplying retail, because they want a slightly more level supply base. And you can see there that there is a massive differential between basically May, which is the -9, to September, which is the +7. So we as a farm are aiming for that summer milk and to get those bonuses, because we don't have a grazing sort of system. And the final thing I want to mention, just so you know, that in ARLLA is a cooperative, obviously Danish based, which means all members should receive the same milk price. However, we in the UK have negotiated that if we have to jump through extra hoops to supply specific markets, then there would be a bonus for that. And that's what I'm just going to come on to now. And it's called the ARLLA 360 program. So in the ARLLA 360 program, we receive some money as farmers as what's called cost compensation. Now that is because we will do other extra things. So there are certain customers, mostly supermarkets, but not just supermarkets. There are also some other big retail names who would like to align themselves to a higher welfare, a higher environmental standards, and just generally increased standards all round. In order to achieve that, we have to jump through quite a few extra hoops, I'd call them, and they actually call them metrics. As you can see there's 26 of them. One really significant thing that ARLLA is doing across the board, and that is that they are steering clear of recommending a system. And Don's, I noticed, said again in his opening introduction that, you know, whatever we do, we have to be the best. And that also applies to welfare or care of the animals or the environment or whatever it is. So we don't want to say that one system is environmentally more sound. This is ARLLA. We don't want to say that one system is more cow welfare friendly, or the Happy Cow Project, as they like to call it. We've tried to keep away from that. I thought I'd just share with you 2 or 3 metrics so that you can see, give you an idea. And there they are. Obviously, with Yonis there, you can see that it's basically going to be eradicated soon, which could be a challenge for us. Stillbirths, we are well within the requirement. Lameness, we're well within. You can see under mastitis, it's a bit of a challenge for us. And you can see that in culling that we are doing okay in that. Now, obviously, and this is what I was going to think about, is that to share with you that some of the things, like, for example, culling, is very significant when it comes to your carbon footprint, as well as the welfare of the animal, as well as actually the cost and efficiency of the farm. So those things can really interact. So probably you saw something like this last week if you were attending about the carbon footprint. This is ARLLA's version. This is a screenshot basically of what ARLLA send us. And what we've realized, this is as a farm, that actually the more efficient we are, the better our carbon footprint. And to give you some idea, we are just at the moment just below the average. Next year, when the data comes out, we will be well below the average, but maybe everybody will. But that will be because we produce so much forage, because it was such a good forage year. But I spoke earlier about what we should do to try and perhaps make our farms more efficient, but also more lower our carbon footprint. And I just wanted to share with you just a little bit about our young stock system. So there's a picture of it. It may not look particularly special, but if I tell you that we are aiming for less than 1% losses between birth and 2 years old. These calves were born this summer. They will stay there until next spring. They will then go out to graze. They then come into here. They're served, stay in there, go out to graze for 2 months, and then they'll come back into the herd. So I just said 2 years, so that's obviously very significant to us, that 24-month period. So we're not carrying any heifers out on average. We're not carrying every heifers over. And also we have virtually no losses We're aiming for no loss, and obviously very low morbidity, which is illness as well. So I wanted to just show and share one aspect of an innovation that ARLLA are looking at on our farm, an area that we can probably do something about with our carbon footprint. Once again, Don mentioned about the enteric methane. Obviously, we can't do anything about that at the moment. We're waiting to see what the scientists produce and then whether it's economic or not. But I just wanted to look at this area here, which is manure storage. And I wanted to show you our absolutely fantastic storage system. So probably quite a few of you have got a store like that. We have got some issues looming. Up until now, that has been quite acceptable. It's all within the law and it's completely safe and all the rest of it. However, I did mention right at the beginning that we have the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. And both those are about to become very significant for us. So the Clean Water Act is going to supersede what we call the MVZs. That was the nitrogen sensitive zones. The Clean Water Act will require us not to put on any manure, organic manure, on any land unless it can be absorbed or taken up by the plant within its growing season. So we will need to change our storage from 5 months, which is the current regulations, to about 7. So for us, that'd be quite easy. We just dig a bigger hole. However, unfortunately, the Clean Air Act comes in 2027, and by law, we will have to reduce our ammonia emissions. And now talking about various ways, and obviously what you can see there is not a solution. However, some of the research that is taking place on the farm is called this, the N2 treatment plant. This is ARLLA have partnered with N2 Applied, a company from Norway, and they have put, in the process of putting 3 plants into the UK, that there are about 10 in the whole world. Ours was the first to be up and running. And I wanted just to share with you some, which I guess is potentially exciting news. I mean, it's the very early stages, so you have to bear that in mind, but some information about how this works and what the benefit to us as farmers might be. So this plant that you just saw uses what's basically a plasma torch, so any of you welders will know about that. So it's a very high energy electric bolt, which basically passes through the air, which is going through it, and it splits the nitrogen gas into free radicals. That gas with these free radicals is then pumped into the slurry, and it adheres to the ammonia. So the ammonia then makes these stable compounds. Because it's acidic now, the ammonia will stay in those compounds and won't be released. So then you don't get any ammonia release. So from the clean air point of view, this is a really big benefit. Then, because you've saved the ammonia and it hasn't evaporated, because we have added nitrogen to we're splitting the gas into the slurry, we've nearly doubled the nitrogen value to the plants. There's an additional benefit that they've found, and I'm not sure, I have to say, whether it's because of the acidification or other reasons, but the methane also is not released. So that would help reduce our carbon footprint, because it would count as a credit because it's locking up the carbon. The slight downside is you do need a 100 amp, 60 kilowatt 3-phase supply to run it. But as time goes on, maybe it becomes more efficient. But that's just an example of, I would say, probably now near market and possibly nearer than some of the enteric solutions that we might see on our farm. And so that is something that could be exciting in the future. I think it's whether it arrives in time for 2027, I don't know, but that is, it will. One of the things that we've got to do, and we've got to get our as an ARLLA member, we have got to reduce our carbon footprint by 30% by 2030. So this might help with that solution. So finally, I just wanted to share with you how I feel about dairy farming currently where we are down here in the southeast, how I feel about it being a member of ARLLA. And I think after the last few days of COP26, you might be feeling a little bit like this. In other words, that the solution is plant trees. Well, obviously the solution is not plant trees. Part of the solution might be planting trees, but I strongly believe that we as dairy farmers are part of the solution by producing high value, high energy, high protein, easily digestible food. And so I think we do have a good future. I think it's a challenge. And I think as long as we concentrate on the things that we can change at the moment and not worry about the things that we can't change at the moment, as time goes on, I'm sure solutions will come along. Thank you very much.
That's great, Neil. Thank you very much for that insight into your farm. A lot of questions coming through. I'm actually going to take a few of them at the minute. What I do want to say is if you are sending questions through, please use the all panelists option on the Q&A function. You can scroll down and you can send it to individual people, or you can send it to all panelists. So if you are sending questions in, please hit the all panelists button. So I have a few good questions here, Neil, which I'll jump in and ask you. You touched on obviously the technical efficiency, so I'm going to take some technical efficiency questions. How regular are you mobility scoring your herd? I see with ARLLA there, one of the metrics, obviously somebody has seen is lameness. How often are you mobility scoring?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good question. Yes, there are so many things. So part of the 360 program is to do it quarterly. We were allowed to do it ourselves as a farmer and then once a year be verified. Susanna, our daughter, is actually a qualified mobility scorer, but they have decided that they would like to have external mobility scorers all the time. However, we have been, this is on the farm, part of the innovation, but we're not the only farm. Quite a few farms in the UK have been trialing some automated scoring, where a cow goes under a video camera. This is the one we've been using. So the cow goes under a video camera and it watches her gait and compares it with her gait of previous times, and then builds up a picture. And they've been verifying that data over some time, over the last couple of years. And soon ARLLA will offer that as an option. So instead of having an external verifier, external mobility scorer come in every quarter, you will be able to upload the data automatically from the video system, the algorithm that has been set up. So they're moving to automated, and that will be hopefully twofold benefit. One is it saves us actually collecting the data and then having to send it, but also it's going to give us real-time assessment of the mobility of our animals and hopefully be able to pick up issues with either mobility or cow lameness or whatever it might be, or even body condition scoring.
Okay, is that a fixed camera then, Neil, or
yes, it
yeah?
sits over a race. As the cows exit the milking parlour, they go through it. So our cows are going three times a day. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll take another question here on the heifer management. What's your breeding policy and what heat detection system do you use?
Okay, so breeding policy, I have to admit you're asking the wrong person. You should be asking my daughter or my wife. But I can tell you, and I alluded to this, that kilos and fat and protein are really important to us now. So we are not interested in any bull unless he will improve our kilos of fat and protein. And that is a major driver. It has been for some time, but it is a real major driver. So that, and everything else, well, you know, it's your own personal preference, but you know, what color the animal is or whatever it is, but kilos of fat and protein. Obviously for us, because our cows are in a lot, the cost of a single space in our building is relatively expensive. So we are looking to maximize the milk and the solids from per cow, not per hectare. Whereas you know, some farmers might be looking to manage maximize per hectare. We're trying to maximize per cow. In terms of heat detection, we now we have two systems, which we're basically moving over to one now. The system for the cows is we are using collars, and so we're using that solely now for our heat detection, and in fact our fertility improved last year when we went on to it. The heifers currently are in sheds where we are using RMS, but we could, once we get enough collars, we will move over to that, and they will also be on collars. We've learned to trust the collars, and the algorithms are really good now for that. Yeah, we're very happy with that.
Okay, no, that's great. Great, Neil, thank you very much. I think at this point in time, we will go on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Mark Little. Mark is a veterinary advisor and also a Nuffield scholar. He came to doing his Nuffield scholar in 2019, and also he's completed a PhD research in the nutritional influences on immunity in the transition dairy cow. So Mark, if I hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, Judith. Thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and discuss my great interest. As Judith has quite rightly pointed out, nutrition and even nutritional management and how we can use these to keep cattle healthy, and keeping cattle healthy to combat antimicrobial resistance. Therefore, really protecting the sustainability of antibiotics. So my presentation is titled Managing and Feeding for Sustainability. I'm going to talk about 3 points. Firstly, how I think sustainability relates to antibiotic usage. Secondly, my Nuffield farming scholarship travels looking at nutrition and health. And thirdly, and importantly, what's happened since I finished my Nuffield travels and how my thoughts have changed. And this involves how I'm embarking on a new venture to try to make a difference to Northern Irish farms so we can lead the world with healthy cattle and sustainable veterinary medicine usage. So the first question to address is, what is sustainable agriculture? Well, simply, this is the principle that we must meet the needs we have today while not compromising anything so the future generations can also meet their needs. I think we practice this more in Northern Ireland than in any other countries. That's my view anyway. Many farms are family farms and have been in the family for generations. So in my opinion, many farmers think about their family future and how to pass the farm on to a family in a good state. I just have to think of my personal circumstances. My dad and brother's farm, or should I say my dad, brother and nephew's farm, already thinking of the future. Let me contrast this with one of the farm trips to the USA. I visited a dairy farm in New Mexico whose neighbor had polluted the water source so much they shut up farming in that site, moved 3 miles down the road and built a new dairy unit there. So how does this apply to farms in Northern Ireland? And how can we develop farms and farming systems to be more sustainable? Well, I see this as future-proofing business to ensure future returns, ensuring we have farms in the future. And speaking as a vet with an interest in sustainability, ensuring cattle are healthy now and ensuring cattle are healthy in the future. This involves making sure we have the tools and the veterinary medicines to keep cattle healthy now and also in the future. This is the essence of sustainability. Sustainable antibiotic usage so we can use them now and they're available in the future. When in practice, I really got a buzz out of preventative health. For example, I can think of one farm that after the 9th LDA in the calving season changing the fresh cow diet ever so slightly prevented any more LDAs. And another example where we simply tweaked the timing of a pneumonia vaccination protocol to prevent pneumonia in calves. No change in the vaccine, just a change in the timing, so it worked best. So this is how I think sustainability relates to antibiotic usage. And I picked the travel topic for my Nuffield scholarship with antibiotic resistance. And why antibiotic resistance? It's vitally important. The World Health Organization describes this as one of the biggest threats to health and food security today. So antibiotics are used, as we all know, to treat and prevent diseases caused by bacteria. But resistance occurs when bacteria are no longer susceptible to the antibiotics which would normally work against them. If all our antibiotics stop working, we can't reset this. We can't get them back. This is serious. The impacts on health and food production are enormous. And really, could coronavirus that I put the picture up there, could it be a trial run for something more serious? One of the major drivers of resistance is the overuse of antibiotics. Therefore, it is important to use them only when necessary. And keeping animals healthy is an important strategy here. Simply put, healthy animals do not need antibiotics. So concentrating on managing and feeding for sustainability. In 2019, I really wanted to explore these links between feeding or nutrition and health. And yes, this does mean products to improve health, but not only products, also nutritional management. What do I mean by nutritional management? This is how cattle are fed, such as the amount, the timing, and the presentation. Therefore, I applied, interviewed, and was lucky enough to receive a Nuffield scholarship, which sponsored 10 weeks of travel around the world to study health through nutrition and keeping cattle healthy. The aim was to visit countries which are doing something different, something novel, and making a difference to animal health through nutrition. So I'm going to talk through my travels with my Nuffield scholarship briefly. Now, the first one is a beef story. And I know this is dairy talk, but it's really interesting and demonstrates a thought process with some farmers in using antibiotics. Well, I went to the USA because I've been told they're really reducing antibiotic usage in food animal production. So I visited one feedlot business in Texas who finish 1.2 million cattle per year. And they told me that the vast majority of beef feedlot cattle in the USA use 3 feed additives in large quantities, as the photo shows, by the palletful. These are growth promoters, which are also banned in the European Union. Monensin, which is an antibiotic, which makes the rumen environment more efficient. And the in-feed antibiotic Tylan. Now, in-feed Tylan is used to reduce liver abscesses, and liver abscesses are generally associated with high starch diets. So I challenged the feedlot about changing the diet instead of using antibiotics, maybe reducing the starch a bit instead of using antibiotics. They've very quickly told me they had conducted this study. Both diets, the one I had suggested, lower starch diet, and the one with the in-feed Tylan, both of them reduced liver abscesses, but cattle grow faster in the diets with antibiotics. And using Tylan makes them an extra $28 per head. And when you kill 1.2 million cattle, this equates to $34 million per year. But the big question here is this sustainable? Well, with regards to the usage of feed, the conversion of feed to meat, it is efficient. But with regards to the development of antibiotic resistance, it's extremely, extremely unsustainable. This is because a low dose of antibiotics, it really drives antibiotic resistance. So it started with a bad example. And we also know that the USA market, it's really built on a consumer, a convenience, and a low-cost system. This was obvious when I stopped in a local Texan farm shop. All antibiotics are available to purchase without a prescription, including the critically important ones. A critically important one that we all know is, for example, Marbazole. And these are the most important to preserve for human diseases. And the risk of resistance developing in these antibiotics would be disastrous. This photo captured a 50% off clearance table for those past their expiry dates. Now, antibiotics past their expiry date have a reduced activity, which means if they're used to deliver a suboptimal dose to cattle, one of the major drivers of antibiotic resistance. So it's worrying they're used this way, a very unsustainable way to use them, and for the development of antibiotic resistance. Another example, if we think of the very basics of antibiotic sustainability, it starts with appropriate usage. And what is appropriate usage? Well, I think we're used to it in this country. It involves examining cattle, finding out exactly what's wrong, picking the appropriate antibiotic, weighing the cattle to pick the dose, administering the antibiotic at the right site, either in the muscle or under the skin, getting the duration right. The photo here captures an example of how some farmers in Tennessee administer antibiotics. And if a cattle seem unwell, it's well, guess what's wrong, guess the weight, administer via a dart gun in the cattle, pick a long-acting antibiotic because one shot will do. Well, I'm going to stop using the term a shot of antibiotics because compared to this, we give an injection. Farmers in Tennessee give a shot. However, it's not all like the previous examples. It did start off a little bit bad, but I got some really good examples. Farmers in other areas of the states are very keen to use nutritional health products. And it's important to understand why. It's important to understand the difference, why they're keen to use them. This was demonstrated by dairy farmers in Pennsylvania. Now, when we think about Pennsylvania over on the East Coast, these farmers supply milk to Philadelphia, Washington, and New York. There, consumers want milk from high health herds that use low amount of antibiotics. Therefore, there really is a drive to find alternatives to antibiotics. And some products they use are probiotics and prebiotics. Now, probiotics and prebiotics increase the number of good gut bacteria. Probiotics by adding the bacteria directly, and prebiotics by adding the food for the good gut bacteria. Increasing good gut bacteria simply outcompetes any bad gut bacteria, increasing gut health. The example in the photo shows that due to hot and humid summers, fans, misting machines, and all that are common in cattle houses in Pennsylvania. But never mind gut health, they found that some yeast cell wall products also help alleviate heat stress associated diseases. I also visited a French company that produces essential oils. Now, these are not essential oils for massage, they're essential oils for a nutritional product. And when I looked at the history of this company started from the observation that some French farmers noticed cattle eating certain plants and certain herbs seemed to be healthier. Now, they have a rigorous testing process to investigate the farmers' observations and refine and develop the active ingredient. They had an initial focus on products with an antibiotic activity, but they've changed tact a little bit, and they're now looking at plant extracts that have an anti-inflammatory function, have an antioxidant function, and those which modulate or change or increase immune function, which is an interesting tack. So this new focus is on increasing health and welfare, which fits really well with the French interest in food. Now, what is this interest in food? It's that the French people take great pride in their food. And the respect for animal health and the respect for agriculture is almost ingrained in them. They love their quality assurance products, such as Label Rouge and Bleu Blanc Care, the two logos I have there. And Bleu Blanc Care actually has a lovely slogan for the health of the earth, animals, and people. I'm sorry for the second beef story here, but it's a concept that I think could be applied equally as well to dairy. I visited Patrick Currant's farm there of Charolais cows near Fichy. And in 2008, he realized that the beef price hadn't changed much in 35 years. So he built himself a refrigeration unit and bought a van, and he sells his meat in Paris, a 4-hour drive away. In a way, I suppose a little bit similar to wine clubs. His customers pay into a monthly meat club, and he delivers a package to their workplace around Paris. But not only that, Patrick's customers want to know all about their food, where it comes from, how healthy the cattle are. And as we know, many people who live in Paris go to the south of France on holidays, and they call in and visit his farm on the way south when they go on holidays solely to find out more about his animals. Essential oils, Patrick finds, are vital to improve the health of his herd, particularly increasing calves' defences against pneumonia. And his customers buy from him because he uses them. His motto is Fermier, happy. Happy cow, happy farmer. And then looking at some of the other technologies I found roundabout, particularly roundabout Europe, I discovered a Swiss company who are looking at plant fibres for animal health. Now, my first question was, now, cattle eat plants. What's the difference between plants and, as they put it, refined plant fibres? But if you look at the cells of plants, it was explained to me that these plant fibres, these active ingredients, are actually inert. And if you zoom in on them, the plant cell wall is made from cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin, which are bound together. So they're extracting a pure form of one of these components. Trial work is underway. And again, in a similar way to the essential oils, it's demonstrated an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory function. I suppose I think about it in a way, it improves the gut barrier in a similar way that healthy skin doesn't allow bacteria to invade. So again, raising the bar with cattle health, so they fight off disease better. However, I find that a lot of these products just aren't as effective as antibiotics. They're more expensive as well, while also needing investment and effort and research to improve them and refine them. But I think there's good promise for them in the future. Another really interesting one is a group in Barcelona who work with bacteriophages. Now, bacteriophages are actually highly specialized viruses which hijack bacteria. So they go into bacteria, inject the genetic code, which hijacks the bacteria from the inside, almost like a Trojan horse, getting in undiscovered and taking over from the inside. And then the bacteria become a factory to produce new bacteriophages, which rupture and kill more bacteria, and the cycle continues. Again, there's challenges with the future and how we're going to roll this out. But for example, getting the bacteriophages to the site of infection. With a gut infection, they're actually killed by the acid stomach, so they have to be coated to get them past the stomach. For pneumonia or respiratory disease, they have to be inhaled. And there are also challenges with regional strains of bacteria. And they found that, for example, bacteriophages active against salmonella in the UK don't work against salmonella in Thailand. So they need a bit of work to develop them, produce them, and to deliver them to this area of infection. But it's not all about products. It's about the application of nutrition or nutritional management. Some of these nutrition and management points are simple, but make a large difference. I visited the Netherlands, where they record antibiotic usage on every farm. This farmer and his vet in the photo have used the lowest amount of antibiotics in Dutch farms. And key points are ensuring the mixing of milk powder is mixed at the correct concentration, hygiene in the mixing plant and the buckets. But a really interesting point, keeping the time when calves are fed consistent day after day, strictly 12 hours apart, lowers the stress in calves and disease incidence. I find this fascinating. They've even noticed that when the clocks change in spring and autumn, this is a key time for an increase in pneumonia. So one of his strategies, which got him his lowest usage of antibiotics, is rather than a sudden change in time when calves are fed, he changes it by 15 minutes per day over 4 days, and that's simply enough to lower the stress and prevent disease. So have a think. Did any of you notice any increase in disease? Was it 2 weekends ago when the clocks changed? I'd be interested in your thoughts. I also visited Norway. Now, Norway has the lowest antibiotic usage in food animal production in the world. This is because Norwegian farms are very isolated from each other, so it's meant traditionally or historically that they've had a low level of disease. But biosecurity is also important to protect that head start and low level of disease. Just to give you an example, the main focus for disease eradication in Norway today are the 6 farms who have ringworm. Yes, ringworm, and 6 farms, and they're trying to eradicate it. But with nutritional management, the Norwegian Agricultural University is conducting work in a smart care project. Now, it's recognizing that separating the cow and the calf at birth in dairy herds can be controversial to consumers. So keeping them together can keep them on side. But not only that, so they're limiting separate cow-calf contact areas, and allowing them together for feed times only, so they can go and lie together and eat together at other times. So they're hoping that this will keep calves healthy while reducing the stress on the cow and the calf. So I think it's a good example of how nutritional management could have positive effects on health, and it's something to watch in the future. So with my Nuffield travels, I'm convinced that keeping cattle healthy is absolutely key to reducing antibiotic resistance. Many of the solutions I've discussed do have positive effects on animal health, but none are really a silver bullet solution. None are the thing to bet everything on at the moment. And many of the products are just not as effective and more expensive than antibiotics. However, there are practical points I think we can do now. And this is where I go on to my third point, my journey after the Nuffield Scholarship, because it would be a pity if it ended there. Because I came to the conclusion that nutritional products were not the silver bullet solution, I changed my thinking to taking these three areas into account to make an even bigger difference in farm, encompassing nutrition, management, and medicine usage. And really, we have some practical solutions right now with medicine usage, and it's using them sustainability. And I only have a couple of slides left with that. With sustainable use of veterinary medicines, one of the easy and quick wins is with wormer resistance. Wormer resistance is a growing issue worldwide, including Northern Ireland, and there are local examples of where worms are resistant to certain types of wormers. A similar way to antibiotics, what drives resistance in wormers? Well, when they're used, particularly when they're not needed to be used, resistance rapidly builds. Not only that, if they're used when they're not needed, it's simply money down the drain, or rather money out the back end with no effect. So we need a better solution, a smarter solution. This takes me to my new venture with a co-op here in Northern Ireland, and it brings a bit more science to the veterinary drug use. But yet, importantly, it tries to keep it simple. What's the problem and what's the solution? So the problem, the question is, when do I need to worm my calves? If I don't need to worm them, I'm wasting money and adding to the development of wormer resistance. However, this question is usually more difficult to answer than you think. It's because you have to take a fecal sample, bring it to the vet, they post it to the lab, and all in all, it could take a week or more to get back the result. So once the answer comes back, you don't have an answer if you need to worm your cattle today, but rather, did I need to worm them last week? However, the answer is still to check, which is not a new answer, but finding out the result rapidly in an hour is a new bit. You take a fecal sample, you drop it off, you find out the results before you go home in about an hour. Then you know whether you need to buy a wormer, or if not, the advice is there when you need to test again, usually in a few weeks. So how is this sustainable? Protects against unnecessary usage of wormers and protects against the development of resistance, ensuring the wormers are there to be used in the future. And you can also build up a picture of which wormers are resistant on your farm as well. This simple model can be applied to most scenarios. So let me change track. It says wormers here. Let me go to thinking about mastitis, dry cow tubes. What dry cow tubes are the best? Again, the answer, not trying to be smart, the one which is most suitable for your farm. So we need to do a check to see which one works. So the question is, what's the most suitable one? Let's do a rapid lab check from your bulk milk tank within I will turn around in about a week. Again, sustainable because it selects the most appropriate antibiotic for your farm, depending on the bacteria present, and protects against the development of resistance, ensuring they're able to be used in the future. We're going to develop this concept in its early days, develop for our customers, and to help with the decision-making process and what veterinary medicines to use. So last slide in conclusion, nutrition is key to keeping animals healthy, but it's part of the solution. This drives the reduction in usage of antibiotics. We can also use veterinary medicine smarter. This drives the responsible use of medicines. Responsible as in using them only when needed, such as the fecal egg count test to see when you need to worm. But also refining the use of antibiotics, choosing the correct one, be it an antibiotic or antimicrobial to your farm, and doing a milk test can help you choose which correct dry cow tubes. Replacements to antibiotics will come in the future, and I've talked through some examples such as the bacteriophages. These 4 R's are highlighted for a reason. They've been identified as key in protecting the development of antimicrobial resistance. I really want to find practical and easy solutions on farm to make a difference now. I think the future is exciting, but let's be smart about how we use products. My aim is to bring a bit of science about when to use products and picking the most appropriate one to use. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to rolling out some of these future plans in Northern Ireland to benefit the agricultural industry here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for that great insight into your travels. I bet you got to eat lots of different types of food as well whenever you were away off jet setting. We have quite a few questions coming through here. If you have any more questions for Dawn, Neil or Mark, can you get them in fairly quickly, as we want to finish as close to 9 o'clock as we can. We're back to the panel members now for question and answers. So if I just go through some of the questions. Mark, I suppose we're finished with you, so we'll start with you. A question here, where do you see the dairy industry going in terms of antibiotic usage?
Yeah, very good question, although can be difficult to answer without my crystal ball. All I can say is look at the progression over this last while and what's been happening, and it's continuing to reduce the usage of antibiotics. And I don't see that changing. I think it will definitely continue. There'll be pressure from processors, which will likely continue to reduce the usage of antibiotics. For example, just before the summer this year, there was a European Commission vote to restrict a large number of antibiotics. As in Northern Ireland, we'd actually be subject to these rules. Despite EU exit and everything, we would still have been subject to these rules. And I lobbied hard on behalf of the Veterinary Association to keep these antibiotics available to vets. So that's the type of pressure we're under. It's constantly at risk. And the European Commission could wield their big stick in the future and just decide to cut these antibiotics. So pressure will continue. Let's be ahead of the curve. Let's try our best to prevent disease by using vaccines, getting a herd health vet to help with management changes, and getting a nutritionist to help with feed plans. So getting your veterinary medicines, your management, and your nutrition all together to keep animals healthy. And I think this will prove to government that we can use antibiotics responsibly, meaning they'll be available to us when needed. So I think that's the track it's going under. We'll still be getting more pressure, but let's try our best. Let's demonstrate the best use, and so they're available to use in the future.
Okay, thanks, Mark. A question for Dawn. Dawn, what is CAFRE doing to reduce antimicrobial use on the CAFRE farm?
Well, I suppose the first thing, Judith, is we have to measure and see and sort of keep an eye on how much we're using. And so since 2016, we've been working very, very carefully to measure and record all of the antibiotic use on the farm. And as a consequence of that, we've been able to target the areas where there's high usage. For example, by that time we brought in selective dry carry therapy, and that allowed us to cut the use of antibiotics in that respect by 50% the first year, and we've continued to be able to reduce that as we go along. That's a good story. The difficulty is that probably the biggest use of antibiotics is in injectables, and again we've been looking at that, and we've managed to bring that down about 50% almost in the last 5 or 6 years. Obviously every year is different. There's always going to be bumps along the road. The other difficulty is that those older drugs or the tend to have a higher number of milligrams in each dose. So if you almost a cheat is if you move to the newer drugs, then you actually can reduce milligram usage. But we've tried to avoid that. We're staying away from the critically important antibiotics unless absolutely necessary, and still managing to get those reductions. I suppose the main point is that we've looked at what we do, we've measured what we do, we've put in place standard operating procedures so that if something happens, there's a very clear guidance from our PVP on how we should deal with it. Every member of staff knows what to do. And we have a health program that's discussed and adapted with our PVP on a regular basis. And there's a lot of preventative medicine, a lot of vaccines and treatments in there that don't involve antibiotics. I suppose now, having got to that level, we've reduced it significantly. We're now then the next stage, and that's why Mark's work is so interesting to us, because there will come a point where we have to look at alternatives to antibiotics as well as just reducing the use of them, and that's probably the next step for us.
Okay, thanks, Don. Neil, a question here in terms of the carbon footprinting and ARLLA. Which company do ARLLA use for their carbon footprinting?
That is a very good question. It is it's currently done in-house. They are using MapofAg for a lot of data capture, but they're using the international standard figures for all the feed carbon values, for the methane production based on yield. So they've produced their own standard ones, but they're on the international standardized figures.
Okay, and another question, does every ARLLA farmer have to reduce their carbon footprint by 30%?
Right.
And the base year for that 30%?
Okay, so I think I should have made it clear. So ARLLA as a company made the statement to be carbon net zero by 2050. Then they started with the climate check calculation of data, and at the moment a farmer doesn't have to complete that. They won't get the bonus of 0.9 pence per litre if they don't complete it, but and I think, as I understand, about 90% of farmers have. So there are still farms that only just now know what their carbon footprint value is, how many carbon dioxide equivalents it is per litre of milk. So it's not, no, at the moment, they are not talking about each farm reducing by 30%. I think what will happen is that as time goes on, that there will be incentives. So at the moment, it's premiums to do something, to find out the data. And as we saw with ARLLA Garden, if you don't do it, then you actually have a deduction. And that will happen with climate check. If you don't do it, there'll be a deduction. There won't be at the moment a legal requirement for a farmer to go down by 30%, but as time goes on, they are obviously we have to be part of the solution. And there's a small group of farmers, I think it's about half a dozen, who are looking at how we on the farm side of the whole business can get to net zero, and there'll be obviously a variety of solutions and ideas. So at the moment, it's not a requirement. It's a statement that ARLLA have made to their consumers, to society, and we at the moment are just looking, and it's tentative times. We're just testing the water.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Another question, sorry, Neil. Everybody wants to ask you questions tonight. Another question for you. In terms of your qualities there, your solids.
Yes.
And what are you doing to achieve this good fat and protein kilos?
So as I said earlier, well, the first thing I have to say is that I married a farm consultant and nutritionist. So we have an in-house nutritionist. So we are forever looking at the diet. And when I say looking at the diet, I mean physically looking at the diet and the dung. And we're forever tweaking the diet. And we can do so in order to make best use and respond to the forages that we've got. So that's the first thing. So we do have that benefit, but there are plenty of good nutritionists out there. So I don't think we can give Jane, my wife, all the credit. But that is very important. another thing, and I did allude to this, we have always bred for solids. So even when we've gone for obviously increasing output, milk, we've always gone for a positive fat and protein percentage. And I think that's made a difference. We don't crossbreed, they are Holsteins. So I think that has helped. We do feed, so we are doing, we cut our silage 4 or 5 times a year. You can call it multi-cut, you can call it whatever you like. We always have done that. So we do have, and we feed about 40% grass silage, 60% maize silage. So we can get a high volume of forage into our cows, even though they're not grazing. So I think we have good rumen function, which Mark will obviously be pleased to hear about. So I think we've got that. We don't chop straw necessarily, although we will feed straw, chop straw if we have to. And then finally, and this is not necessarily, we don't feed soya. We do feed no soya bean meal at all in the form of protein. We do feed soya hulls as an energy source. That wouldn't make much difference to the fat. However, the 2 possible magic ingredients that we feed, one is orange peel, which I know sounds a little bit odd, but orange peel actually is high fiber and it has some oils in it. And that's from a local source. It's fresh orange peel. So that might make a little bit of difference. And we also do feed C16 and have done so for a while. And we notice that that does make a difference, and that will elevate our fats by about 0.1 percentage point. So it's sort of a combination, I guess. Okay. But I think probably breeding is the key, which of course is quite slow, you know.
Slow turnaround.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Mark, is there any research to suggest a good plane of nutrition gives rise to minimal use of antibiotics?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, good nutrition can definitely contribute. I doubt rather it can cut the use of antibiotics out completely, which is again my journey. Whether I was looking at nutrition to reduce the usage of antibiotics, but then I kind of came broader again, and definitely come back into the fact that it depends on a farm to farm situation, and that, for example, even if you vaccinate calves for pneumonia, you can still break the vaccine. It can still fail due to management changes. It, for example, if they're in an old house with poor ventilation, or due to maybe a nutritional challenge. And again, you know, so there are really good examples where farm nutrition is making a massive difference. And I'm thinking about extra vitamin E to help against health cleansings, anionic salts in the close-up diet to reduce milk fever. But I take a step back and see what will make the biggest difference in a farm, and that's the track I'm going down the minute. It certainly helps, and good nutrition definitely does help, be it nutritional management and nutritional products, but I don't think it can solve everything. And that's what I'm trying to do, go onto farms, see what is the weakest link in the chain, what's causing things to fall down, and fix it to make the biggest difference on the farm, rather than try to include a silver bullet nutritional product or try to include a silver bullet vaccine when there's something bigger to fix on the farm.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Dawn, another question for you. What other measures are CAFRE taking to enhance sustainability?
Well, that's quite a wide one. Certainly, there's a lot going on in terms of the manure management and the feeding management. So on manure management, we've obviously got fairly well-developed flooring systems that are getting the manure into storage very quickly, covered stores. We've been using lessee spreading equipment for a number of years. We're currently trying to we are always trying to maximize the production from forage, and we certainly put an increased focus on that more recently. We are looking at diets. We haven't removed soya from the diet. We are moving gradually in that direction. We're making a fair change to that, and we're continuing to breed for efficiency in our animals, and our genetic potential is improving year on year. And again, that aim is to produce a more efficient animal rather than maximizing yield. So we're working again towards constituents and maintaining yield at our current levels.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to take a few more questions here now just before we finish up. But I suppose, Neil, another question for you would be the N2 treatment plant efficiency. I suppose the question is the N2 treatment plant efficient to run cost-wise, or is it just for environmental benefit?
So it is expensive to run on electricity. We have quite a lot of solar panels, so during the summer we would just run it for the cost of our own output. So that would be good. It is quite expensive. I think there is obviously a benefit in the additional nitrogen that you have to put on your land, and bearing in mind the availability and price of nitrogen at the moment, that might be very attractive. We as a farm are also interested in it because I said right at the beginning, we have these issues with the Clean Air, Clean Water Act. The Clean Air Act, in order to comply with it, open lagoons like ourselves that we have will not be acceptable. So therefore, this might be a solution to do that. And at the moment, DEFRA are looking at it. They've been to visit our farm to have a look at the technology. If DEFRA were to accept this as a way of mitigating ammonia losses, that combined with reduction in the methane output, and then we wouldn't be required to cover our lagoon, or we wouldn't be required to put in towers, so it could be attractive. And I think costs will come down. They will become more efficient. They're looking at more efficient ways of doing it. You have to remember this is the first farm one in the world, so they are learning very quickly. But I think it has potential, and should DEFRA accept it, then it really will make a big, possibly a big leap, a big difference.
Okay. I'll do one final question. Sorry, I have loads of questions here, but I'll just do one final question to Mark. Mark, have you been on any farm which use minimal or no antibiotics? And what is your opinion of different alternatives out there?
I have been on farms which use very low level or no antibiotics. On my travel there was 2 farms, one which I mentioned in the Charleroi region of France, and another one which I didn't mention in this talk in central Holland, both claiming to use no antibiotics, and no antibiotics for a significant amount of time. Now, there are different strategies on how to do that. The interesting point is they're putting a lot of effort into this. Not only that, both farms, the one in Charleroi region in France and the one in Holland, are making a story from it and selling their own produce. The one in Holland is selling cheese, and in fact won the world's best cheese award, I think in 2016. So they're promoting the fact to use no antibiotics, and consumers actually love it. Here in Northern Ireland, bringing it back down locally, I've been on a farm recently who have 150 cows and use dry cow tubes on about 10 of them. So yes, it can be done, but it requires quite a lot of effort, which kind of brings me back to Neil's story in terms of bonus, or in terms of premium. Should there be some reward for this? Not sure what it should look like, but we do put a lot of effort into this. And should there be a reward for achieving such a low level of antibiotic usage compared to other farmers? It can be done. It takes a lot of effort, and it is being done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Folks, I suppose we've managed to get through a good majority there of questions, and it's taken a wee bit longer than 9 o'clock at this stage, but I would just like to thank our speakers, Dawn, Neil and Mark, and also would like to thank the technical team that have kept this event moving so smoothly. And finally, to the audience that are watching to us, thank you very much for registering and joining in. The next webinar is next Tuesday at 8 p.m. It'll be the final in our series of Future-Proofing Your Dairy Business, and the topic will be attracting, training and retaining staff. Our speakers will be Joe Delves and Marion Beecher. Thank you very much. As I have mentioned, this event will be recorded and is being recorded and will be available through the CAFRE website at a later stage. We'll have a short survey for you to help us improve how these events go forward. So if you could, once the event is completed, please don't shut down, and the survey will appear automatically. It'll be a few questions for you to tick, and that would be most helpful on our part. So thank you everyone, and good night.